Can I take your picture? Larissa sat a few feet away from me on the gray velvet sofa as I aimed my iPhone towards her. I stared at the screen intently for a moment before shifting my focus, looking over the brim of the phone at her defeated, hopeless state portrayed by bloodshot eyes. What for? I don't think it would be a very good one. She found it difficult to speak above a tone of depressed mumble. I'm not exactly prepared for a photo shoot right now. Stop it. You look beautiful. The chipper tone in my voice was a deceiving attempt to bring some semblance of elation to the bleak reality we had learned of our existence. It's not insecurity. You know that. Her looks were always something Larissa was confident in. That certainly wasn't the source of her discontent. Normally, we take pictures of happy times that we want to look back on and reminisce over. But neither of us were happy at that moment. Her face was a cemented lump of apathy that wouldn't be going away anytime soon. Why do you want a picture of me like this? Because I want to remember what you look like. She would be gone soon, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I really couldn't say I blame her. Life had no purpose or meaning anymore. I was finding it difficult not to leave this world myself. The eye in the sky destroyed it all. Some said it was God. Technically, they're right, although their interpretation of God is a bit skewed and thus incorrect. They're just making excuses. I don't exactly blame them for their attempts to make sense of the eye. In a way, I sort of envy their ignorance. I wish I could live in bliss like that. Enlightenment is punishment. Larissa and I were co-workers at Caltech. I was head of the astronomy and physics department there, a position I held for the last 8 years, where I was lucky enough to fuel and satisfy my fascination with celestial objects for a living. Since I was a young boy, I looked at the sky in awe and dreamed of a weightless, floating journey through the stars. At night, I'd sit on my porch with my knees pulled against my chest and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my hand, looking at the moonlight shining on trees and sparkling fireworks hovering above the earth. A career in astronomy was all I ever wanted. Larissa came on board a little less than a year ago. For the past 6 months, we'd been something a little more than co-workers. Romantic interests, I guess. When you reach a certain age, you sort of stop putting labels on things. I suppose you can call her my girlfriend. It sounds so childish saying that at my age. Whatever you want to call it, Larissa had become another perk of my job. At 43 years old, I had never married, never really had a serious relationship since my 20s. Routine, order, and the stars were all the gratification I needed. It wasn't until I saw Larissa that I realized how lonely my life had become. She was 8 years younger than I, and had the same thirst for the stars as I did. It was all we ever talked about, and with me being somewhat more experienced in the field, she clung to my every word, eating them up like she was putting sunshine in her veins. One night, I invited her back to my quaint home in Simi Valley. We sat side by side on the grass next to the large oak tree in my backyard with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, pointing out our favorite constellations. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I knew I had found the person I could share every part of my life with. I loved her, even though I couldn't bring myself to say it. Everything was right in the world. It all came together in harmonious delight when Larissa took over my heart. She filled a void I didn't know I had, and quickly became my satellite, going wherever I went and running circles around me. All that changed 2 weeks ago, when Keck Observatory contacted me for a constellation regarding an unusual discovery. The observatory, located at the summit of Mauna Kea in Hawaii, was managed by Caltech and the California Association for Research in Astronomy. The site housed the two most renowned and scientifically productive telescopes in the world, capable of reaching the outermost areas of space. Each telescope sat mounted on Mauna Kea as two large spheres, 33 feet in diameter. Just after I had come on board in 2008, the telescopes at Keck captured the first images of exoplanets within an exosolar system 129 light-years away from Earth. The main star was named HR 8799. The visuals took over 100 years to reach our planet, and we took pictures of it like a group of excited tourists. "What did you find?" I asked Nora, the director of advancement at Keck, when she called. Her voice trembled on the other end. "I don't know. I'm sending you a picture. You won't believe me if I told you." Sweetheart, just tell me." I heard a deep breath flow into the receiver. "It's an eye." "You mean the Helix Nebula?" I asked, instantly reminded of the formation that looked eerily similar to an eyeball, resulting in the nickname the Eye of God. "No, but similar, only much larger. And it's moving." "Moving? Like orbiting around something?" "More like looking around at things. The pupil is moving." My face contorted from confusion. "What?" It didn't make any sense to me when I first heard it. Now, looking back, I wish I had just ignored that call and went about my life. But I suppose that's the nature of humanity, isn't it? We're all curious and desperate for answers. Nora sent me 2 pictures of what was observed through the telescope shortly after we hung up. The first picture appeared to show ionized gas surrounding an interstellar medium, creating the illusion of an eye. It was unique, although it was certainly nothing never seen before. But the second picture showed the medium moved slightly to the left, as though it were a pupil looking around and studying the universe. I wasted no time and booked myself and Larissa a flight to Hawaii. Part of my rush there was anticipation of studying the odd formation and trying to determine why it was moving. Larissa could help decipher its origins. Plus, it was a nice excuse to take a trip to Hawaii together on company money. The next day, after we landed, Larissa and I drove up the access road in a car I rented up to the summit. At the top, we were just above the clouds. Mauna Kea is the highest point in all of Hawaii, and it's considered the best location in the world for massive telescopes like these. There's no obstruction blocking the view. I had visited the site a few times since I took over the astronomy department. Each visit was breathtaking. Nora greeted us as we parked and led us through the observatory directly into the control room, where a monitor was displaying the eye in the sky. In front of the monitor sat a couple of young men I had never met before, operating the controls. The pupil had moved further to the left since the last picture was taken. "How much time passed between the 2 pictures you sent me?" I asked Nora. "Couple of days. It's moving very slowly." Possibly. It could also be moving incredibly fast. We're just observing a different gravitational time dilation through the telescope. How far away is this constellation? Nora took a deep breath and exhaled, maintaining her steady eyes fixed on mine. 45 billion light-years. What? That's inconceivable. The farthest object ever recorded is Galaxy Max 0647 JD at 13.3 billion light-years away. And that was with the Hubble telescope. Keck doesn't have that functionality. Well, it does now. We enhanced its mirrors 2 months ago to increase magnification capabilities. My eyebrows uncontrollably shot into the middle of my forehead. I don't recall hearing the board of directors approving such a thing. They didn't. It was a privately funded experiment. One that worked. Who funded this? Larissa chimed in. I'm sorry, that's classified information. I looked up at the thick metal beams and pipes of pressurized hydraulic fluids over our heads that held the massive telescope in place, with indignant jealousy. The farthest-reaching telescope ever created was partially owned by the company I held a relatively high position with. It was within my fingertips, yet I hadn't even the slightest knowledge of it. Optical instruments like this were invented to expand humanity's knowledge and answer some of the most complex and mysterious questions about the origins of everything in existence. And they were keeping the wonders of the universe a secret. So, basically, you have the most powerful scientific invention ever created by humanity here, and didn't think it was necessary to tell anyone. It was an experiment. The funding was enough to cover the upgrades and reversion if it didn't work. Part of the agreement was secrecy. We only started using it last week. We wanted to be sure it worked before making any kind of announcement. This is not some rich kid's Tonka truck, Nora. You should have gotten approval, or at least mentioned it to someone. There's something I haven't told you about this eye, Nora continued, ignoring my discontent. We saw something else. My intrigue felt like a rush of adrenaline. What? One of the young men turned in his swivel chair and locked his wide eyes with me. God. I instantly rolled my eyes. Throughout history, when mankind has encountered something unexplainable, it's attributed to some sort of god or supernatural force, only to be given a logical scientific explanation many years later. Why would this be any different? We don't know that, Tim. Nora shot at him. What the hell is he talking about? Larissa questioned. I supported her demand. Indeed, what nonsense is this young man referring to? Nora resigned momentarily, then turned her head sideways to address Tim. Turn on the infrared. Tim flicked a switch on the control panel, and about 30 seconds later, the outline of a face surrounded the eye. Shades of red and orange overlapping each other, clearly displaying a nose, a mouth, and a second eye that was covered by a winking eyelid. And just beyond the eye, I could faintly make out more similar infrared outlines. My world had crumbled at the sight. One of my worst fears was a reality. Turn that monitor off right now, I ordered in a low growl. Tim sat motionless in his chair, frozen in perplexity. Now! He jumped at my outburst and fumbled to find the switch. What's gotten into you? Nora demanded, squinting at me. Who else knows about this? The 5 of us in this room, and 10 other people. They all said it was God, too. Keep it that way. Tell no one. Tell that piggy bank of yours the modifications didn't work, and revert the telescope back to its original state. Why? What is it? I looked at Nora with a stern eye. Humanity will tear itself apart over this. Is it God? Tim's hopeful expression was like that of a child. I couldn't take that away. Yes. It wasn't giant aliens, if that's what you're all thinking. An alien is a creature from outer space. These figures showing up on the infrared display weren't in outer space. They were beyond it. Nora and her team had built a telescope that had the capability of reaching the end of our universe. 45 billion light years. That's where everything ends. What's beyond that has been a complete mystery. Until now. It's something I was frightened of when I first conceived the thoughts in 2004 after reading an article by Jim Holtz proposing the idea of universe creation. 3 years later, Lancaster University successfully created an entire universe in a test tube, simulating the Big Bang with low-energy whirlpools of helium. The result was a functioning universe, no larger than a marble. I had feared that our universe was created this way, and that day in Keck Observatory confirmed my fears. I saw our creators. Everything we've ever known to exist is all just a mediocre science experiment. At any minute, they could pull the plug on us and wipe it all away. We're all living at their will, inside a test tube somewhere. We left Keck and returned to our hotel shortly after. I pushed the telescope away from the eye and hoped it would never be found again. Larissa pestered me all night in our hotel room, doing all she could to force an explanation from me. I caved eventually, telling her about Lancaster's test tube and how its origin is the same as ours. She wept the rest of the night. All we know, all we believe, everything is a lie. The greatest lie ever told. I can't live in a world without meaning. She sat on my couch, crying a few days after we returned from Hawaii. I don't want to wake up every day and think, is this it? Is today the day they end their experiment and kill us all? That's not a life I want to live. Don't let the stars die earlier than they're intended to, I urged. Let me show you the sky. Just one more time. Her bottom lip quivered as a tear ran down her cheek. Even though you're with me now, I'm light years away from you. That night, while I was asleep, Larissa snuck outside and tied a noose to a thick branch of the large oak tree in my backyard, and hung herself. Her side of the bed was empty and cold in the morning. When I extended my arm to her side and found it vacated, I already knew. She had taken her own life. Each night, I sit on my back porch with her picture displayed on my phone, staring at both the stars and the shadows they create over my backyard. One shadow in particular dominates my focus. Deep down, I know it's unlikely the eye will see her, but a personal conviction is a powerful prospect that shields truth. So I leave her there, oscillating in the wind, a dismal plea of desperation, the ominous scarecrow for our creators. I don't have much time for a preamble, so I'll get right to it. My name is Carlton Ferguson. I live with my elderly dad in one of the small villages in the Caribbean islands of St. Vincent. For those of you who haven't been abreast of what's going on in my island, La Solfiere, our resident volcano, has erupted for the first time in almost 42 years. The eruption had spewed lava and thrown tons of dust and ash into the sky, blanketing a lot of towns and villages in the northeastern corner of the island. The sun has effectively been blocked out for most of the day, engulfing us in a weird twilight world where everything is dark and coated in ash. Despite efforts from the government to try and evacuate citizens out of the red zone, some folks, like my dad, were too stubborn to move. "I was here for the eruption at 79. We ain't going nowhere," my dad said, his lower lip quivering in old man defiance. Life hadn't been kind to him. His wife, my mom, died shortly after I left secondary school, and the golden girl of the family, my older sister, Darlene, left to live in Miami without so much as an occasional phone call. Not long after, diabetes eventually took his eyesight, and he was now completely blind and dependent on me for help. What else could I do? I left school and began to work as a handyman, which is how I've been supporting him for the past 10 years. At least the house was paid for. But now we had a bigger problem, which is how we were going to get out of here. On mornings till around midday, when the sun was at its brightest, we would see rays of it peeping from behind the thick clouds of smoke left behind from the eruption. But after about noon, any natural light faded away. I read about countries in the Arctic Circle that experienced this kind of perpetual darkness, and I never thought I would ever experience something so similar as a Caribbean boy. Anyway, the darkness got so bad that by 3 p.m. we basically got whatever supplies we could manage from the local store and got back inside. It was perfectly pitch black outside until sunrise the following day. We've nestled into this routine for the past 2 days without problem, until I heard it for the first time on Saturday night. At first, I thought it was a few stray dogs or goats abandoned by their owners from a nearby farm, but the sounds it made were different. Dad already got his shot of insulin for the night and turned in for the night. I was scanning the radio, trying to get some news on whether the worst was over for the eruptions. Over the past few hours, we felt some tremors, but nothing as bad as the initial eruption. But I still got the feeling the worst was yet to come. How right I was. Between scanning the stations, I distinctly heard what I thought was music. At first, I thought it was the radio channels overlapping with each other, as they often do when the signal is poor. But it didn't take me long to realize the melody was coming from outside my house, and not from the radio. I didn't know what to make of the sounds, to be honest. In fact, trying to remember it to type it out hurts my head. I was confused, because my dad and I were one of only 3 households that chose to stay behind, while the others were evacuated. The only family that were close to us were the Clements, and their house was a good 20 minutes walk away from ours. I thought of calling out who it was, but just before the words managed to escape my mouth, I remembered something my dad told me years ago, and to avoid responding to calls after dark. I always chalked it up to superstitious rubbish, but the night had an eerie quality to it, and I didn't want to tempt fate. Eventually, I got up and checked the front door. This might have been around 10 p.m., so, with the exception of a few lights from the neighbor's house in the distance, there was nothing to be seen, besides gray ash and the cars and houses it engulfed as far as the eye could see. Nothing. I felt ridiculous being as jumpy as I was. Here I am, a 28-year-old man, jumping at his own shadow over some jumbie. Just as I turned away from the front door to walk back to the recliner, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a song. It was a voice. "Carlton." A raspy female voice. I didn't imagine this. It was real. This was really happening. Someone was out there and needed help. Once again, I approached the door to open it, but before I could move the curtain to see outside, I heard another voice from behind me that almost made me jump out of my skin. "Carlton, sit down." I turned and saw my dad in the doorway of the living room.
I heard it too, boy. Don't answer.
As you probably gathered by now, my dad isn't the easiest person to live with. He could be stubborn, fussy, and argumentative in the way only older Caribbean folks could be, but there was part of my mind that didn't want to argue with him on this. Maybe it was the eerie pitch blackness outside, or the hoarse tone of voice that called my name. In any event, I obeyed my dad's instruction and sat back down on the recliner. He felt his way over to me and sat on his rocking chair next to mine.
Carlton.
This time, it was louder.
Let it call. Once that door closed, it ain't going anywhere.
My dad said, wiping away the sleep from his dull eyes. What is it? He felt for the tin of Vicks Vapor Rub in the breast pocket of his shirt and pasted some over his chest.
Something that doesn't belong here with us.
I wanted to know more, but I got the feeling any answer I got wouldn't be satisfactory. My dad must have sensed what I was going to ask and spoke first.
Don't answer it. Don't look out the door again after midday.
What if it's someone who needs help? Dad turned his head to me, and for a second, I felt like I was 10 years old again.
Boy, use your head. Who else is out there after dark? You know old Jonas or any of them wandering around in all this ash and smoke during the day, much less during the night?
He was right. Most of these villages were ghost towns now, and it wasn't as if we would be in a much better situation to help anyone, even if that were the case. I guess. No sooner had those words escaped my mouth, I heard a deafening shriek from outside. It was loud, but based on the echo, I could tell it came from a distance away. It came from the direction of the Clements house. No sooner had I heard that, I heard another shriek. This time, not even a shriek, more of a gleeful squeal, almost pig-like in quality. At this time, my dad placed his palm on my hand.
Go and get some rest, son. Say a prayer or two if you can.
Before he wobbled back to his bedroom, feeling the walls on the way for guidance. What began as concern slowly grew to panic and outright terror. The following morning, I tried to walk over to the Clements house to see if they were okay. I managed to get as far as the gates when I saw the door was left wide open. Part of me wanted to go inside, but another part of me already knew what I would find. Staying behind in the red zone is a criminal offense, and Dad and I were already breaking the law, so we couldn't exactly call the police and report what happened. It was a difficult situation. The streets were lonely and caked in ash and soot as more continued to fall from the sky like snow. Or, at least, what I imagined snow would look like. I thought about my mom. She always wanted to see the snow for herself. Dad promised he would take her and I to Canada someday to see it for ourselves, but that never happened. I felt a pang of sadness when I thought about those old memories and how much Mom missed out on.
Missed out on?
That wasn't my imagination. No. Something behind me said that. I spun around so hard I almost hurt my neck, just in time to see the faintest outline of a silhouette in the distance, about 10 feet away. It was the shape of a person, but something was wrong. Its neck was horribly disproportionate to the rest of its body, longer than its torso. As a silhouette, I thought I was mistaking it for the outline of a street lamp or a piece of construction equipment, but no, I was seeing correctly. I turned and ran back into the house, kicking up clouds of ash as I did. I almost crashed into my father as I burst through the front door.
Boy, what the hell's wrong with you?
He started. It was following me, I said, before he could continue. Without missing a beat, the look of annoyance on his face turned to concern.
"Lock the door and windows, quickly."
No sooner had I put the last bolt on the window, I heard a tapping on the glass. I didn't dare look at it. I just closed my eyes, felt for the curtains, and shut them before hurrying back out to the living room. Dad was fiddling with his wedding band when I got out there. More than afraid. He looked sad. "You okay?"
"Yeah."
We sat together in silence for a few minutes, listening to the whispers around the house as it seemed to move with lightning speed around the outside. 1 second, it was at the front door. Next, it was at the side window. The other time, it was at the back door. At this point, it was more of an annoyance than an actual threat. I couldn't hold it anymore. "What is that out there?" Dad raised his head. For a second, I thought he would say something insulting or just ignore me, but he actually replied.
"I don't know. Years ago, when I was a young man, younger than you are now, I used to hear about La Sulphur, the things it had inside of it. Those things were there since the native days, before any white man or black man came to these islands. Who knows what it is, once it stays out there."
I thought for a minute. "We can't stay here forever, you know. Eventually, we'll run out of supplies." Dad looked in my direction.
"I told you, I ain't leaving. This is my home."
"Having a home isn't gonna mean anything if we starve inside of it." He paused for a while, then his lips trembled again.
"Well then, maybe you should leave with Darlene."
I rocked back. At first, I didn't understand what I was hearing. "What does that have to do with anything?" My voice now raised. He just turned his head away, still playing with his wedding band. We sat in darkness for about 20 minutes, so wrapped up in our arguments we didn't realize the whispers had stopped.
"It hurt me every day. I couldn't give you, Darlene, and your mother more."
Hearing that was the closest thing to an apology I ever heard from my dad. We never had a very affectionate relationship, so I wasn't sure what to do next. I just put my arm around him and squeezed his shoulder.
"Carlton."
The whispers returned from the front door. This time it was trying the doorknob.
"Carlton, Carlton, Carlton."
It sounded like an AI repeating my name at super speed, to the point it sounded like one word. Wiping some tears from his eyes, my dad turned to me.
"You should go."
"Don't be stupid. I have to stay here."
"Go tomorrow. Pack a bag and bring some help if you can, if it's not too late. I survived this long. It won't be a problem."
Sitting this close, I never realized how old he got over the years. His eyebrows dotted with streaks of gray. His once muscular neck now thin and frail. To me, he was always an intimidating force. Now feeling him in my arms, I wished I had more time. But he was right. I will bring back help. He smiled, showing off his yellow teeth.
"I know you will, baby boy."
His smile had pain in it. So did I. Tomorrow, I will have to take his advice to get some help. I hope he's right.